WolfPunch.
I think that's what it means. Either way.
You take an apple with you, right?
I'm gonna cut this out. I took 4 apples with me to work.
Who eats apples?
I don't know, like people.
Who needs 4?
William Tell? I don't know.
William Tell shoots them. He doesn't eat
Well,
them.
he's got to have apples, though. He'd bring them with him to work for
He
practice.
just found them on the way.
Yeah.
He was in an orchard.
Yeah, he doesn't have to eat them.
Yeah, Dan.
Anyway,
We never established that he hasn't ate the apples. He could
That's
use them for
true.
target
why
practice,
doesn't
so-
William tell us about Ready Player One?
His name's
Oh,
Yezin.
Gosh.
That's about as good as an intro as we're gonna get.
Here's hoping that's the worst joke of the episode. Otherwise,
No, I'm sure I can do worse.
yeah.
And you will. So this week we're WolfPunch again, and we saw Ready Player One.
Are you ready, guys?
Calm down, Michael. Calm down.
Fuck this fucking movie.
I just exerted more enthusiasm than
You did.
anybody in the whole movie, I feel like.
I don't know about that. I feel like everyone was really excited about the shitty geek shit.
Dan, you were pretty excited.
Yeah.
That reminds us, so there's 4 of us here today. We're at the library, because we are Zaneless this week.
You
So
can't break
it's-
us in the Shinra.
Mm-hmm. What? What?
That's a Final Fantasy VII joke, isn't it?
Thank you, Yezin, for clarifying. So I didn't have to.
Why aren't you just in Ready Player One? See, this is
What
the
shocked
problem.
me. He didn't like the movie either. This is
I know.
for him.
I kind of feel like Michael pretended not to like the
No,
movie.
I was bored.
Because he knew that he should be embarrassed.
I wanted to like the movie. I really did. I was just
I know
bored.
you were very excited. You had already taken a stance beforehand where you were like, it's going to be me and Dan versus everyone because I'm going to love this movie. You
Yeah.
did not.
I did not. I almost fell asleep. I was bored.
It was a boring movie. Anyway, so Ready Player One is a story based on the 2011 novel by Ernest Cline, directed by Steven Spielberg.
Starring Cyclops.
Yeah,
The best X-Men.
The guy who played
Shut
Cyclops plays Wade Watts, who is just a gamer nerd who goes by the gamer tag of Percival, who lives in a future where there's an online game called the Oasis, which is basically a VR, virtual reality online experience. And essentially, this game runs the world. Coins in the game are like dollars. Everyone is always in the game because life is shit and everyone's poor. And a few years prior to, like 5 years prior to the movie's beginning, the creator, Halliday, died and left a quest for everyone where there's like keys and like find an Easter egg, and you get the Easter egg.
Willy Wonka.
Yeah, it's Willy Wonka. You take control of the game, and he's all eccentric, but he's dead, so not like Willy Wonka in that way.
Gene Wilder's dead.
Okay,
Sick.
WolfPunch out.
Did he play Johnny Depp in the remake?
Anyway, so Wade Watts and his multicultural band of friends,
Nerds.
nerds,
Nerds!
have to
Sorry,
get the
say it.
Easter egg and take control of the Oasis before an evil corporation does, and that's the plot of the movie.
Actually, I've been being corrected on this often. They're not nerds, they're geeks because nerds implies that they're smart.
Did Ariane
Yeah.
correct you on that?
She sure did.
Yeah, she does that a lot.
Yeah.
I promptly forget afterwards.
Yes. But she hasn't been the only one. People keep doing that to me, and I'm just like, I don't.
It's interchangeable.
That's
It's
a
fine.
that's a fucking nerdy thing to know right there.
Don't
Who cares?
care.
The
Yeah.
guy who referenced Shinra said it's fine to use them interchangeable.
Yeah, I still don't get that reference. I'm not a loser. I'm very cool. So
Okay.
Yeah,
Anyway.
so I'm just gonna say it. Originally, I was gonna do like a 10-minute monologue at the beginning of this,
We agreed.
just about, but then we kind of just all started talking. Ready Player One is the Lego movie, but taking itself really seriously and without the clever subtext or without the aesthetic that the Lego movie has, or without the thing where it's like about a kid's relationship with his dad. Ready Player One is just like, you do the Lego movie where you're like, oh, I'm going to throw in every reference that nerds and geeks and kids like, but without it's not deconstructing anything or critiquing anything or really doing anything interesting at all. It's just...
But Yezin, we're on our phones too much. Didn't you see the end of the movie? Or did you leave?
Was that the idea? Well, let's not get into spoilers
we'll
yet.
get to the ending when we get to the ending. Because I gotta tell you, it's weird. The message there at the end is a little weird.
Yeah.
Hypocritical, some might say.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Anyway, get on your soapbox.
Right. Okay, on my soapbox. This movie, it's a really straightforward story. Like, it's a story we've all seen before. But what makes it unique is what makes it so bad. Is that it's like just the straightforward hero story. Like, guy, he doesn't have much, but he has like one thing that he's really good at, and that thing ends up saving the world. And through that, he meets a girl, and they fall in love. Blah blah blah. But the thing that makes it especially unique is that the thing that saves the world, and the thing that is essentially the substitute in this movie for actual virtues that a person could have, like being determined, being like skilled, being clever. The thing that is a substitute for that is pop culture knowledge and like nerd cred. So the movie, especially like coming out after Gamergate, just becomes like the most not for its time movie possible. It's just so irrelevant to like where we're at.
I'm going to go out on a limb here and say most people probably don't know what Gamergate is. You want to just cover that real quick?
I feel like Spielberg
context?
probably wasn't too hip to Gamergate.
You think?
I mean
Yeah.
just for the sake of the fact that this is a movie podcast and we're talking
Right.
about movies, let's
talk about so Gamergate is this thing essentially where like 5 years ago or something like that, there was a huge culture war in gaming. Dan, you probably have know some details about it too. Where essentially people got really mad at this one.
It was originally supposed to be a debate on integrity in journalism, and then it spiraled horribly out of control into this whole big, horrifically sexist, misogynistic attack on females in gaming and nerd culture that was instigated by trolls on 4chan and Reddit, and a lot of people got doxxed, some people got swatted, and it was just a really, really shitty thing to see about nerd culture.
what are some of those words?
Swatted is when someone sends a SWAT team to your house, right?
Yeah, that's a joke.
And doxed is...
Yeah, so doxed is when you post someone's personal information online, like their home address, their personal phone number, and then they get constant harassment, death threats, rape threats, all that fun shit.
Yeah.
Nerds are not heroes.
No.
That's
And
also
Percival.
a subsection of nerd culture.
Sure.
In no way in hell would I ever defend any of those actions that those people taken, but it tarnishes it as a whole because it's really, really ugly and fucked up, but there's also a fuckload of different kinds of nerds and gamers out there.
There are good nerds out there. I think we're all nerds, and we'd like to believe we're good nerds.
Kyle doesn't.
But
I don't believe I'm a nerd. I think I'm super cool.
But anyway, the thing about Gamergate is it sort of drew a line in the sand. And I think Gamergate was also connected to like a lot of other movements that were happening. Like, yikes, I don't want to get super political, but there was that mass shooter who was like really mad about his inability to do well with women. And that sort of sparked several conversations about essentially like male entitlement and sort of this like, so there's like this pre-Gamergate idea of like, oh, well, the story is like where you have like the white male hero and then like they're kind of a nerd and we should, because they're like a nerd and they're not a jock and they're not like cool, we should root for them and we should want them to get everything they want. And then after Gamergate, the veil was lifted and that ideology was sort of like challenged, where now we think, oh, well, I mean, do these people necessarily deserve everything they want, and are they entitled to just like getting the girl at the end just because they completed a routine set of tasks, like you would see in like a Mario game or a Zelda game where you get the princess at the end.
I'm going to draw a really fucking weird comparison here, and it's going to be a quick shortcut here, but there's a film, Molly's Game, which came out a few months ago.
Yeah.
The one guy who wrote The Newsroom and whatnot, what's his name?
Sorkin,
yeah. He directed it, and that movie actually fell prey to something really, really similar, where the climax of it, minor spoilers if you plan on seeing it, but it hinged on hiding public figures, basically like demons in their closet, basically kind of like for the greater good, or for them, like, you know, being able to continue to do their job. And that came out like right after the whole Me Too movement, and that fucking kneecapped the hell out of that movie for so many people because it's like, like kind of really cringeworthy. And yeah, that's one thing about like the whole Gamergate thing. Like I definitely see the point and like how people were upset about that, but it never really. I mean, again, I'm a white male gamer, so
Yeah.
I mean, the whole context there, it never really affected me, or it seems more of like a callback to like nostalgia and like classic, boring, bland '80s heroes adventure movies. Almost like Kevin Smith-esque when it's like Clerks, where it's the schlubs coming up to win the day. And yeah, things have changed that might not really be pertinent or as acceptable today's day, but in the sense of nostalgia, that's the context where I did have an issue with it.
Sure, I guess you don't really completely expect like a big blockbuster movie like this to flip the script too much. Which, I mean, it would be great if it did. It's just I never expected it to be a deconstruction of geek culture in any way. So, wasn't surprised.
Yeah. Well, I didn't think it was going to be a deconstruction of geek culture. I just thought that it should, or it should do something like I was. So two things I want to point out that just came up. Sort of, first of all, in the idea of nostalgia, I don't really actually see as much of a nostalgia thing in this. So what I've heard from the books is that the book is almost unreadable because every few minutes the character is describing like, oh, a thing from the 80s, and then he won't just mention it and it's like, oh, well, you got it. It's like an Easter egg for you if you like that thing. But then he'll explain what it is and then talk about whether it's like awesome or whether it's sucks or whatever. With this, there actually wasn't that much of like an 80s focus. And there also wasn't that much
That's what people keep telling me, and they almost mean that as like a reason why the movie, like why they were disappointed.
I've heard people say that like there weren't enough references.
I know.
And I'm like,
like, Jesus Christ, what are you talking about?
No, I think that's fucking stupid. It just the only thing that like at least with the 80s, it's like it's about a specific time period. With this, it really just seems like it's about nerddom now and what. So I was thinking like, well, who is this movie for? I actually think this movie is for mid-20s to early 30s nerds.
Yeah. 25 and up was actually the largest demographic that went to go see the film.
Yeah, it's not
people who can kind of remember the 80s,
but
get those references, and then there's the people who get the modern. They're still in the culture.
Not the people who like
all
grew
people
out of nerd.
Too old to like this. Just gonna throw that out there.
They should be too old to like this.
Yeah,
honestly. Sorry, guys, you're too old for this.
Sorry,
shit.
Dan.
Sorry, Dan.
Yeah.
I'm not sorry. You should feel bad. No,
it's great.
I just mean like when the new Star Wars movie came out, I remember word had gotten around that I didn't like it very much, and like at my work, like just out in the town, and people would be like, "Why didn't you like it?" And I would say things about it that I thought were dumb. And then I would always get back well, I mean, this is a kids movie, and I'm like, is it though? It's a movie appropriate for children, and children are definitely going to watch it, but. I don't think that that's like its sole demographic. And so I think but in comparison, like the new Star Wars movie is a much more sophisticated story than what this was. Same thing with like, we shit-talked Black Panther for quite a while, and it's like...
Shouldn't have.
It's a much more sophisticated blockbuster than what this was. And that was something that really disappointed me about this movie is Spielberg isn't like one of my guys, like in directors that I love. But whenever I think of big blockbuster movies, and anyone who has listened to this podcast or heard me talk knows those aren't really my go-to movies. But the ones that I do like, Spielberg is responsible for a lot of. And I just kind of hoped that he was going to maintain elevating the blockbuster. And I don't think that he did with this movie.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things why, unlike you guys, I actually enjoyed it is because I had really low expectations for it. Like, I am a big Spielberg fan. Like, I've loved virtually everything I've seen by him growing up. And, like, when, like, you guys don't think it's so much, like, harking back to 80s things, but it reminded me a lot of, like, to an extent, like, The Goonies and The Wizard, the one movie where, like, the kids they got the power glove and it's basically just a big Nintendo commercial. It felt like just a dumb kid adventure movie in that regard. And nothing is elevated, nothing's good, nothing's like stand out aside from like the whole we have pandering, we have nostalgia and geek culture things. But that's honestly like all I really wanted from this, or all I really expected to get from it. Like I definitely wouldn't put it on level of something like Black Panther or anything, but I would definitely put it on the same level of enjoyment as I would like older Marvel Studio films, because it's just that kind of like wash over you, watch it, enjoy it, and then move on kind of entertainment.
No.
Here comes the disagreement.
Yeah.
I think for the most part, I don't disagree with you that much.
Yeah.
It's just
I do.
that's
but
something
we'll get to that.
I'm really, really tired of watching like big, loud, fun movies that just wash over me. Because Spielberg needs to get his teeth back, and I don't just mean Jaws. I mean he needs to take his teeth off the nightstand, put them back in his mouth, and make something that isn't just like Academy bait shit that bores your grandparents or Ready Player One.
Lincoln was pretty good.
You know what? I didn't see Lincoln actually, but I haven't heard anything bad about it.
Yeah.
But but I mean, I'm not blameless in this, and I'm certainly not qualified to give Spielberg career advice. But I'm just saying, like movies like Jurassic Park meant a lot to me as a kid. It's one of those movies that I can still watch as an adult, and I think, oh, this is great. And then they reboot it and they make Jurassic World, which everyone in this room knows that I hate a lot. And I think that like those are two good examples of like the way blockbusters have evolved. Like they're being bigger and louder and dumber, and characters are more quippy, and they've got to be really badass, and everything. Like even a movie like that really cashes in on like your childhood fantasies of like when you're a kid, the coolest dinosaurs. I mean, when you're an adult too, the coolest dinosaurs are Velociraptors and the Tyrannosaurus Rex, and then like some 8-year-old writes a script where it's like, what if they team up and they save Star-Lord at the end of the movie? And you're like, wow, this is stupid. This is a bad idea. And I feel like Ready Player One is just like a big advancement of that. Of like, you like cool shit, and what if you get it all shoved in at once, where you get to see fucking Spawn and the Iron Giant running around in the same fight, and you're like, these are two drastically different worlds of characters that I don't ever want to see together, and I certainly don't want to see that just for the context of, isn't this fun? Like, Ready Player One would work so much better for me if it was a comedy. That's why the Lego movie, like, I didn't even love the Lego movie, really, but, like, that's why that movie works for me, is I'm like, this is all a big joke.
And Ready Player One actually fails to be funny almost every time it tries. There are very few moments that got laughs, yet it felt like it was, like, I mean, you say what you will about those, like, the early Marvel Studio movies, they got consistent laughs throughout the movie. Like, people will be sitting in the theater laughing, like, mostly every time that they were looking for a laugh.
People love Joss Whedon quips.
But I mean, in this, like, who's laughing? Like, very few people, very not often. I walked out of Ready Player One thinking, this is like the worst movie ever. It's just, to me,
that's not
but
true.
going into it, I felt like you thought it was already the worst movie.
Yeah, because to me, this is like the asshole of pop culture and just everything wrong with pop culture. Like, just sort of the navel gazing aspect of it. But okay, so
It's
earlier
all holes with you, right?
Yeah, I guess so. But so there's this. Okay, for me, the definitive take on nerd culture is the Star Trek episode of Black Mirror, USS Callister. In that episode, it's a very similar concept where you start out with like a nerdy game developer, kind of like Halliday, who's created this like video game that everyone is now obsessed with because it's a VR simulation that lets you live out your fantasies in the game world. But what that does is it takes that character, and it's actually like the reason why it's so good is it's a distillation of Gamergate. It takes that character who's like a nerdy white guy who isn't really good at like meeting people or isn't really good in the real world, and then you feel bad for him. But then you see that he actually, despite being not good at things in the real world, he's filled with rage, and rather than trying to better himself in the real world, he goes online and is the shittiest possible person. Ready Player One didn't have to be that. It didn't have to make the nerdy male gamer the villain, but it needed some kind of critique beyond, well, go outside sometimes at the end. It needed something more than that. I mean, for example, you have a moment where you find out that his best friend, who he thought was a guy, is actually a black lesbian woman. And then it's like, well, what are we doing with that? There's the thing about the Oasis that they say at the beginning is that it's an escape, yet they don't actually do anything with that relationship between the real world and the escape world.
They do it with side characters where it's not as important. Like, my understanding of the book is that Wade is fat. And as a fat man, I'm like, rotund representation in cinema is very lacking. And it's like, and I mean, you pointed out as a joke, though, I was like, he's on a treadmill the whole time he's playing that game, so he's not fat. But I'm like, it really would have helped, in all honesty. I'm not I'm like doing a joke of like I don't really care if people are fat. I don't want to look at fat people, but like it would have helped if like he wasn't also just perfectly fine and normal in the real world, and then like the girl that he meets online that he's in love with is also like same age range, very attractive, except she's got a birthmark on her face, and usually you have to go to a Wes Anderson movie to see that level of depth. But
but that's actually a big deal. Is that they have this moment where they reveal this thing like, well, the Oasis is an escape, so people are trying to better themselves and be something better than what they are in the real world. But the main character is super good looking, and his avatar is like isn't even that much better good, and it's like the girl is actually super good.
Like a drooly chode in the real world, but that's just me.
I mean, maybe to you, but like that guy has no problem getting dates. You know what I mean? And then the girl is also super pretty. And the thing is, like, if the Oasis is an escape, then why are these people all like something that they say is like, oh, well, this girl you're in love with in the Oasis, she could be a 500-pound dude in his mom's basement. And it's like, well, why don't you actually like explore that? Like, what would have happened if at the end he had met like the girl he was in love with turned out to be a guy? Like,
global ticket sales would have gone down 30%.
Pretty much. But that's the thing is that like they don't like explore any of those ideas. Like what the main character in the books, at least he's like overweight, but in this he's just he's just a guy. And then with basically every character, there's no all they do is in the opening sequence they kind of explore like, look, everyone has a different life and they're living their ideal life in the Oasis, but they don't actually explore that at all. At the end, all they say is like, well, reality is all that matters. And I'm like, is it? If you can actually create a virtual world with stimulus and total immersion, why does reality even matter? Reality is just where we are. So I think the ending message of the movie is actually kind of just, it just seems like something he throws in there to be like, oh, well, yeah, but this too, because I want to have a message. But really, it's just a celebration of geekdom and nerddom, a celebration without a critique. It's a celebration without like doing anything. And even those the dumbest of Marvel movies, they do something like.
Well, I think part of the problem with this movie is it's not a science fiction movie. It has a really good setup to be a science fiction movie.
That's so true.
But it isn't. Like, and it never really set out to be. Yeah. I mean, it was meant to be like a big spectacle blockbuster movie. But it's just because the premise lends itself to so many different forms of storytelling, you notice that and you're a little let down. Like, I mean, let's talk about the villain for a little bit.
Right. The president business from the Lego movie pulled out, made less interesting, and put into this movie.
Yeah. So like there was a moment in this movie where I was just like angry. And it's when
moments.
Okay, so throughout the movie I was angry. As you may have noticed a few times looking over at me, at one point I had my head in my hand, but fuck it. The most annoying part of this movie to me was there was a scene where the villain sitting in his evil throne conjures Wade into his office, and he's telling him like, hey, I want you to work for me, I want you to win this for me, and I'm not such a bad guy. Like I'm gonna turn all the high schools on Planet Bullshit into the ones from the Breakfast Club, and like the main character knows, oh, you've just got a bunch of nerds talking in your ear to give you pop culture references.
But by that he means that the boss is having a conversation with the main character, but he has an earpiece in which nerds who actually know about pop culture are giving him pop culture references to use to communicate with this guy.
Yes. As
if that's a normal thing. Yes. As if you should have...
And so, like, the setup in this movie is basically, like, the evil businessman villain doesn't get pop culture like we do. He doesn't actually care. Money. He just wants to make money. And then I'm sitting there and I'm like, that's all this fucking movie is it's a bunch of, like, guys in suits who don't give a shit about pop culture, just spoon-feeding it to a bunch of people that do so that they can make money. And I'm like, so I'm watching this, and I'm like, it's like if you were the main character, but you just sold out. Like, it was annoying.
Right. It's a movie that has like an anti-cap. Not, I don't know if it goes so far as to say anti-capitalist, but has sort of like an anti-corporate mindset. Yet it's pushed by a large corporation.
Yeah.
And the people who are making the most money off this movie are the people who don't really give a shit.
But even aside from that, it was like.
You guys have described like every blockbuster
yeah,
film
I
ever.
know. That is every blockbuster film ever. You're right. But it's like it's particularly annoying in the context of this movie where they're just like, what's the worst bad guy we can think of? Oh, somebody who doesn't get us. Somebody he doesn't care. And I'm like, that's
about the Iron Giant.
Yeah, I'm like that's
and like
that's so shallow. Where
exactly. It's like it's true that a lot of these flaws are flaws that are in all sorts of blockbuster movies, but in all these other blockbuster movies, at least the core themes are actually really they're white bread, but they're also like really true. Like I mean, it's like something like Jurassic World. There's sort of like I mean, fuck that movie, but the villain is bad because like he doesn't have like a respect for life or something like that. Or like Billy Zane from Titanic, he's classist. There are more true critiques happening.
I'm going to go ahead and I understand what you're saying and I don't disagree with it, but Vincent D'Onofrio in Jurassic World is the worst offender just because and I'm not even going to say spoilers, is the second he shows up on screen he's like, Raptors, we should get them to work for us. You're like, that guy's going to get eaten by a raptor at the end, and it's going to be quote-unquote poetic justice, and now I've got to wait 2 hours to see that happen, and I don't give a shit.
But I mean, Nolan Sorrento, I hate that I know his name, is worse. Because Nolan Sorrento, like, first of all, he's a mass murderer.
He's a mass murderer slave owner, and he's occasionally played off for comedic effect. Like, it's so weird to me where he's like, I'm glad you turned down this offer because I'm going to fucking blow up your trailer and you're all going to die.
And I'm going to kill your family. And then he does, even though, like, when he does kill Wade's family, the shot that they show, I wasn't paying enough attention to see if he showed remorse.
He's not remorse. He's not sad at all.
The movie doesn't dwell on it.
Well, he's got a girlfriend now, Mike.
Yeah, he's got it. Like in the next scene, he's like, well, he's got a girlfriend now, so family doesn't matter. Like he's on that. Like the last guy they show is like
the villain from Hurricane Heist.
His shitty like aunt's boyfriend, and it's like, oh, it just seems like he doesn't care. Anyway, the point is, Nolan Sorrento actually.
Can I just interject real quick? Did you ever watch Dr. Horrible's sing-along blog? Like.
Nope.
There's just a cheesy part where like Nathan Fillion picks up like a gun that's about to blow up and somebody's like trying to stop him. He's like, I don't have time for your warnings. And it's like played off as a joke. And that's what that scene reminded me of in Ready Player One when he's calling and he's like, get out of the house. And then like the asshole boyfriend is just like, yeah, don't talk to me. Don't call here again. And it's like, I'm like, this is so goofy.
Anyway, right. But the point is like he kills a bunch of people and then later he's played for comedic effect when he's getting kicked in the balls.
Yeah,
like it's so, and
or at the very end, it's spoilers.
Let's get spoiled. Well, nothing is interesting in this movie. We're not going to recommend it at the end. Like, Dan might, but
it's so goofy to me at the end of the movie when he shows up to the stacks and like all of the people swarm around and they're like, "You better walk out of here while you still can. We know what you did. You're a bad man." And then he pulls out a gun. And they're like, "Oh, I gotta go." And then he is just like walks up with a gun and is getting ready to shoot this like 20-year-old for playing a video game. And then like he changes his mind, he gets arrested by the cops, and then he's sitting in the police car with like his evil henchwoman, and it's like played for comedy again. Where it's like, now you listen to me, and then she slaps him and it's like, wah wah, and it's like, no, he was about to shoot a kid.
Yeah.
Just mere moments ago.
But then he hesitates from shooting the kid when he sees the glowing shit in his hand. And it's almost like he has a moment of like emotion, like they're gonna do a thing where like actually deep down, he just wanted to be a nerd too. Or I thought that's what they're going for.
Really,
then the next scene,
magical.
Yeah, and then the next scene, he's just like, all right, here's what we're gonna do. And he's like, it's like a womp womp smack in the face moment. And yeah, so Nolan Sorrento, this like president business character, is just such a tacky villain. The only way, I mean, like, I don't know if there's any way to make this concept work, but if you have to get like the best actor. You got to get yourself a Samuel L. Jackson. You got to get
what?
You got to get like a good actor. I mean, like
I don't think that actor is bad. I just think
he's a good actor.
That's
no,
I don't think I've ever felt like him as a menacing villain in like any role.
Yeah,
ever.
Samuel L. Jackson.
Yeah.
Well, I was thinking of Kingsman. The reason I brought that up is like Kingsman is a movie.
He should have had a lisp.
Yeah.
Well, all I'm saying is
then we're back to nerd.
So I'm saying Kingsman is a movie that I hate, yet Samuel L. Jackson is still good in it. You have like sort of like a diabolical, crazy villain, And so I think this movie almost needed that. Like, well, if this is like the most boring shit ever. Make this guy interesting and well performed. But the reason they couldn't do that is they want to be like, well, nerds are eccentric. Like the people who act normal, they're like the bad guys.
I love that his avatar looks like Clark Kent.
Yeah,
that it's like the most popular superhero's alter ego is the extent of his imagination.
That was pretty great.
And let me ask you this. So do his foot soldiers look like the villains from Spaceballs as a reference, or is that just a bad design?
Oh, it's bad design.
Yeah.
Speaking of his foot soldiers, something that never becomes clear in this movie, and it's so dumb, is okay. So when people are playing this game, they have like a VR headset on, and they might have some like equipment, but it's all based on motion, right? And so the main character, he has like a rig where he runs on a treadmill to run around. But then other people that don't have that rig, they just put on the goggles and just do shit in their living room or at the end of the movie in the streets. They're just running around with the VR headset on playing this game. And it doesn't make any sense because they can't see in front of them. What? Anyone?
Well, we don't know the accident rate for Oasis.
Apparently everyone is just like running around in the street playing this game, and none of them can see.
I mean, do you want me to make up like a really boring justification for why that is? Because
I'd rather
you'd be bored, I'd be bored. The audience
I'm saying is like I'm saying don't do that. Don't have them on chairs. Have them in like. Have them like all standing still. Maybe they can move their arms, but their feet are standing still, and that's all with a controller or whatever.
Speaking of explanations, I was way out on this movie like pretty early on because the exposition was just mind-numbingly boring and went on forever.
Right.
And I was bored like from the beginning of the movie because like exposition's fine. I get they have to explain stuff, but like it went on. And on, and then by the time the actual movie started, I was already like, I'm ready to go. Is this over yet?
Yeah. And the kid's not very interesting either. Like
no.
Ty Sheridan or whatever.
Yeah. Like,
he's not a great actor for this or for anything. But I will say, okay,
he was all right in Mud, and he was all right as Cyclops.
I liked him as Cyclops,
yes.
but
you just like Cyclops. I think what you mean to say is I like Cyclops is what you mean to say.
Yeah.
So another aspect of the movie that I just okay. So the thing about this movie that you sort of just have to accept going in is that in this world, the game is everything, and like whoever controls the game controls the world, and like it's a big part of the economy or whatever. And I'm like, okay, I can sort of understand.
You have to accept that concept, or you can't watch the movie.
Yeah, it's like
so it's not worth critiquing.
that
right. But the aspect of it that I think that the movie just that loses in all the junk is the fact that so I don't know like what the symbolism for the game is supposed to be. You know what I mean? Is the game gaming? Is it nerd culture? Because the only way it really functions is the internet. Like if this is a critique of like the internet, you can start to do that because the internet is a thing that essentially we're all in all the time and it runs our lives, and like in real life we spend half our time, like if all the time you're on your phone, you're probably connected to the internet somehow, so you're always in a virtual space in some sense.
Speak for yourself. Have you seen my phone?
Yeah, that's true. He has a flip phone. But that's not how the rest of the movie treats the Oasis. The rest of the movie treats the Oasis as like a gaming nerd culture thing. And then its creator is this like Halliday guy who he's Willy Wonka, but he's also the biggest narcissist ever. So like the thing about Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is, it's like there's a contest and there's sort of like a really mundane way to control this big candy chocolate empire. But at least that is based on like virtue. Like Charlie wins by being like a better kid than the others. Whereas with this, it's like the movie keeps trying to say like subtly like, oh well, it's really about how they wanted whoever won the Oasis game to be connected to the world. But it's not based on that at all. It's all based on trivia about Halliday's life and his interests. And his interests are all like, 80s like movies and science fiction and pop culture. So like it just
the final test is just playing a game and hunting for an Easter egg.
Yeah,
That's not personal trivia to him, I guess. I'll give him that. But I see your point. It still stands.
It's still gaming. Like it's not. He said that there's this idea that the movie tries to throw at us that like, oh, well, holiday. It's not just about. It's like, I mean, the final test, the double final test, where it's like he sees the gold-filled room and then the wizard is there and he's like, sign this paper and you'll have the Oasis, and he's like, no, this is just like when you had to sign.
When you dicked over Simon Pegg.
Yeah, this is like when you dicked over Simon Pegg. But then after it's like, oh, you got it right, and then he gives him the Easter egg, and then but basically by doing that, he still is in the same spot as he would have been had it just been signed the papers. Does that make any sense? Like,
Yeah,
it's not like in order to win the contest you have to be like, I want to share the Oasis with everyone, and then it's like you win. It's like, no, you just have to not sign a paper, and then you get what you would have gotten by signing the paper.
True.
That makes sense.
But he learns a lesson from it, and
he doesn't.
he shares it with
It doesn't.
5 friends, and then at the end of the movie, he decides because his life is sweet, and he's got a bunch of money and a foxy girlfriend, that he'll shut the Oasis down 2 days a week. So all the poor people whose lives are big piles of shit, who count on this, have to be miserable for at least 48 hours a week. There you go.
True.
And he's our hero, Dan.
Yeah.
So this movie's garbage. Defend it now.
Dan,
So-
you've been quiet.
Yeah, what do you want me to say?
What do you
Yeah.
have to say? Like,
It was fun.
okay.
Fucking Gundam was sweet, man.
It was. That was the one moment I was like, this is pretty cool.
I think you guys are like expecting a ballet from a strip club here. Like that's what I think.
It's
Like,
not. It's not that I expect a
I
ballet
like
from a
dumb
strip club.
movies.
It's just I do
It's-
expect them to be good dancers.
It's Steven Spielberg, though. You know what I mean? Like to say that, like, oh, it's like it's dumb schlock. It's like, no, Steven Spielberg shouldn't be doing like dumb schlock.
I mean, I think it's dumb schlock, but I think it's more elevated and connected, like than say something like Pacific Rim 2 or something. Because I was actually thinking about this a lot. Like,
Okay.
'cause
I haven't seen.
enjoy-
I now wish I'd seen
I
Pacific
would
Rim
rather
2,
watch that.
but I
than
bet
even
Pacific Rim 2 is better than this.
I mean, I personally don't believe so at all. And a lot of that is like context for me as well, like comparing that directly to the first one. And a lot of things that I thought the first one did really well, this one, or the second one, kind of just took a dump on in ways that were just frustrating. This one, it was just like, I don't know, I heard Spielberg like compare like a long time ago to just like this warm, comfy blanket you could pull over yourself. And yes, like I would not on any level put this on par with like, you know, Jurassic Park, Hook, Minority Report. As far as like a film that he's done, it's lower tier. It's definitely lower tier for him. But that doesn't stop the fact that I was excited and still am excited to see a big budget spectacle film from him that he hasn't done since what? Kingdom of the Crystal Skull? I mean,
Yeah.
horrible example because I mean it was kind
Sure.
of fucking
Can I
trash.
Was the spectacle really impressive?
That's the thing, though. It wasn't.
I
That was my big frustration.
Enjoyed it
with
quite a bit though. I mean,
Really?
a lot of people didn't. I personally like the opening race sequence. I really enjoyed that a lot. And like, yeah, as pandering as dumb as like a lot of the action sequences were, I thought they were really fun. Like the Zero G one where they're all like dancing in midair. I thought it was gorgeous. He's like typical top of his game. Like it was. I like seeing like visual, stylistic, like shot composition and action. And I thought what he did with a lot of the scenes was actually pretty damn cool.
I feel like it's better than some movies.
It's better.
but
It's
still,
better
like,
than a lot of movies.
I feel
It's
like
not like the best, but I still enjoyed it.
No,
I expect more. I still like, the shots might have been composed better, but I still expect more from Spielberg. To where like the visuals, just like it was just. I mean, I get that it's a computer world and it's digital, but everything was just so digital that it all was like there was no depth. It was all flat.
I mean, and that's very, very valid. A lot of it is also just me coming from the fact it's like I'd rather have this than nothing at all sort of aspect of it.
Okay.
It's like it's
Rather
not
than nothing.
top tier, but like I'm still really happy to have this, and I still really enjoyed it.
Okay.
See, there are certain things that you're saying that I agree with. Like this isn't the worst movie I've ever seen. There are things about it that
Yes, it
make
is.
it. All right, don't stop. Shut up. There are things about it that make it particularly annoying to me personally. Like I would pick this movie over Jurassic World, though. Like I would pick this movie over certain things. But like I agree that I want to see Spielberg do like another blockbuster. Just this wasn't anything that I wanted. But I mean, he's a direct like he's he's a bigger name than any other director. Like James Cameron has the 2 highest grossing movies ever, but everyone knows Spielberg more than they do James Cameron. And it's like, you think like Jaws is a huge blockbuster, and that was made, granted, a long time ago, but it's like if you tried to market that as a blockbuster now, it wouldn't work.
Yeah.
It's a long movie of just a fucking police chief arguing with the mayor about why they should close down beaches. And then occasionally
You saw Finn.
you see a fin and like a dog gets eaten and a
John
kid gets
Boyega
eaten.
wasn't in Jaws.
What?
John Boyega wasn't in Jaws.
Because you said Finn.
Yeah, I got it.
I also
Okay,
thought of
I'm-
Finn. Not gonna lie.
Okay.
But I just like a lot of his earlier projects, like Raiders of the Lost Ark or like Saving Private Ryan. These are like blockbuster movies where like he had a very, very specific passion for like movies from this time period or these kinds of stories. And I hear that he's a video gamer. It's just I wonder how much of a passion he had for this project. Or I wonder if like filmmakers now look at like geek culture the same way like hospitals look at cancer, where it's like, this is terrible, but we make a lot of money off of it. It's just,
Yikes.
yeah, I'm just saying, like, it's a joke. That's a bold example.
No, it's bold, but it's poignant.
It's just I wonder like how much did you have a passion for this project? Because like you're naming off movies that like fucking Minority Report. I wasn't even thinking of that, and it's like that's a good movie.
Yeah.
He's a really, really good director, and he's a really good spectacle director, and he doesn't even always have to like change. Like I don't fault this movie for like not vilifying geek culture or anything, because he doesn't have to like change your perception on anything. Like it's just sometimes the style or the story that he's doing. Like Indiana Jones is blatant good versus evil, but it's like it's got this 30s vibe, and it's really gritty, and it's like this is great. And then when you just go back to it, and you're like, let's make it digital and big and loud and dumb, you get Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And it's like, I just want to see him go in his own direction more. The things that make him unique as a filmmaker instead of...
Did you see the post?
No, I didn't see the post.
Well, you got what you asked for.
Yeah, fair enough.
Okay, so first of all, it's not that it needs to vilify geek culture. Just that it needs to say something. It needs to do something. When you're using all of these properties and you're doing, it just feels like whoever wrote this story and whoever made this movie thought that this is like the final word on geek culture and like adventure and like
I feel
story. It's almost like the Lego movie.
I see that in some of the marketing.
Marketing's marketing.
But marketing is marketing. But it is.
I see that in the movie a little bit. But okay, so but aside from that, like talking about spectacle, I think the spectacle shots are like. I guess one problem I said, like, maybe the best scenes of that were maybe some of the Shining sequences where it, like, really flipped from being, okay, this is cool, and then, no, this is kind of shitty. It just kind of went back and forth. And then another aspect that I thought, like, I might agree with you that the scene where they're dancing and they're, like, up in the air, that was pretty. But I think the problem is that's also one of the cringier scenes.
Oh, for a second, I thought you meant where they're dancing in the gold room from The Shining. I was there. I was about to get really mad.
No. The gold room shit was bad. No, I mean when they're at the nightclub and then Percival or Wade Watts is with Artemis, Artemis. I guess so. With that scene, like. A lot of the gender politics and like that is like again something we brought up earlier with Gamergate. Nerd culture has a huge problem with like writing women, and this movie doesn't improve at all. And I guess one reason why I'm just so personally like annoyed by this is that like, well, we know that nerd culture has this problem, and this is the big nerd culture move. It's like people were foolishly saying like, oh well, this will be for nerds, what Black Panther was for black people. And I'm like, no.
I said that ironically to Kyle a few times just to piss him off. Yeah.
I mean, and it's like, no, but it's not even just that. It's that it's like the fact that people think this, like, if you know that this is just this big nerd culture movie, why not improve the aspects of nerd culture or say something about the aspects of nerd culture that are so problematic right now? And it doesn't. Artemis is a manic pixie dream girl for the first whole part of the movie, and then she sort of just becomes like a weird, I don't even know. But like,
my favorite part of her character though is when she gets mad at Percival and she's like, "You just think this is a game," and like
when you say favorite, you mean like not favorite at all, right?
That's when I related to the main character the most, was when she was like, "You just think this is a game," and I was like, "Yeah, I thought it was." And then she's like, "Didn't you know that my father died in a video game slave labor camp?" And I was like, and I'm like right there with Wade of like, why? How would I know that? That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard of in my life.
For the record, he's not exaggerating.
No, that's
there are video game slave labor camps where they slave labor people to play the game.
Her big escape plan is she's like feeling around for a hatch that lets her out, and then the like computer voice is like, "Now you're on your 10-minute lunch break." And I'm like, can't everyone just escape from there then? Like, they're just like, "I'm going to lunch."
I don't know. I don't care. But like, at the beginning, so Artemis first shows up, and it's like, and Wade is like fanboying over this girl that he's like, "I watched all her Twitch streams. She's so awesome." And then it's like, she's the typical like manic pixie dream girl. She's like a girl that the guy meets is instantly enthralled by, and she's like super like badass, and like in her first scene where she meets Wade, she's like quizzing him on like holiday trivia, as if that's like a thing that defines what a good person is. Like, oh, Halliday's favorite color, his favorite movie.
The whole plot was based on them knowing about Halliday to solve the.
But that's such a. Yeah. It makes. It's not that it doesn't make sense in the movie.
I don't think she was like testing how good of a person he is so much as testing his usefulness.
But she's testing his usefulness, but in scenes like that, which exist in all sorts of movies.
But it's her seeing if he's a worthwhile person to get to know.
Yeah. Right, but in all, you have that in all sorts of scenes where like a character will test another character. Except in this scene, the thing that they're being tested on is so weird and shallow that it just makes,
trivial.
God damn it, WolfPunch. No, so it makes the movie like hard to get into when you see stuff like that. And so from that point forward, he just sort of keeps interacting with this character, and she doesn't have like, she's just like there to be like an object for him to like pine over. And so then you have the scene like 1/3 of the way through the movie where he confesses his love to her, and she's like, "You don't know me, you don't know the real me, that's crazy," which is right. Yeah, you just met this girl a couple times in a video game, you don't know the real her. But then rather than actually like deconstruct that or do anything with that, which honestly I don't think that's a high bar. I think any other movie.
No, she should have been 65 years old.
No, I don't mean that, but like I feel like any other movie would have done something with that, with the idea that like, someone
did with her best friend, with his best friend.
Yeah, but
she had a birthmark on her face.
Exactly. The only thing
she's fucking gross.
The only thing they do is like, oh, she has kind of a birthmark on her face. They have like 2 lines of dialogue about it, and then it's done. It's like, she's like, "No, that's crazy. You don't know me in the real world." But then as soon as they meet, they're like about to kiss. And it's like they don't do anything with that. And she's like the only character who they come close to like him having to be confronted with that. Like with his best friend, let's just be honest, that's not a thing. Like having a best friend, it's not an obstacle at all. Saying like, "Oh, well, we did do something with that. His best friend, who we thought was just a normal white guy, is actually a black lesbian." Yet he dealt with it, guys. Like, that's not a thing that anyone should worry about in this, that anyone does worry about even in this day and age. Or, no, there are people that do, and, like, whatever. But that shouldn't be a thing that should be an obstacle. It should be a thing that he recognizes and like, "Oh, that's interesting. I wonder why they choose to be that way, and now I'm going to... now I understand them better now that I know what their life is." But it's not a thing that should be an obstacle to their friendship. Whereas with the romance, there could be actual obstacles, yet the movie doesn't do any of those. It just like, "Oh, well, she's got a birthmark." It's like, "No, I still like her." And it's like, "Oh, you guys are meant to be together then." And then that's how the movie, from then on, the movie just does that.
I got like this feeling like it was like, "Oh, she's disfigured." Like the movie wanted you to think that, and it was like, that was fucked up to me. I was like, no, like it was such like an old way of thinking, like, "Oh, this girl, because she has a birthmark, she must be ugly." And it's like,
hey man, Quasimodo doesn't get the girl. That's how shit works. If you're ugly or lumpy, you're alone.
But she's not ugly. That's the thing. Like,
Yeah,
the fact that the movie was trying to make you even think that.
The movie makes
day and age.
The movie makes you think that there's some kind of real obstacle for them to be together, and also the movie just sort of points out the absurdity in a guy who just met a girl being like. They point out the absurdity in a guy who just met a girl on a game telling her that he loves her. Insane shit. But they do address that, but then rather than actually confronting the main character with that absurdity, they're like, no, he was right, she was wrong. He did love her, and she did love him. She just wasn't ready to accept it. He had to save the world and do more world-saving shit for her to be like, yeah, you're right, I do love you, and you love me, and this is normal. You know what I mean? Like, they're not... It's astonishing. Like, I bring up Gamergate, and it's like, yeah, these are things that you could argue, well, the movie doesn't have to address those, but given where we are, wouldn't it be cool if the movie didn't just actually, rather than, I'm not just saying address them, if the movie didn't reinforce all of the problematic aspects of nerd culture? Because that's what it's not just not critiquing them, it's reinforcing them. It's being like, oh, well, you know, the gatekeeper and best nerd is like a white male gamer, and he's the hero of nerddom. And
just like me.
Just like Dan. And the girl isn't as much of the hero as they are, but like the girl that's like the best one at gaming, like who actually gets the references, they'll be the main character's girlfriend. And if they say that they're in love with her, then that's true. That's just a thing. Like there's no critique. And then so the thing is, white people suck. That's the thing. Is that they take. I'm just kidding. Sorry, whites.
You're okay. You're fine.
That's cool.
We'll allow it.
I meant the whites listening, not you guys. Anyway, take the main character. They do the classic thing where it's like, oh, the white main character has a bunch of multiracial friends to prove that they're cool and not racist, but they don't do anything with those characters.
Sure.
You have like the Japanese guy and then his little brother, and it's like...
He's not his little brother, that's racist.
He's a 17-year-old Japanese guy hanging out with an 11-year-old. How is the 11-year-old not his little brother? I don't know. It's whatever. Why would an 11-year-old just be like, oh, I'm hanging out with these adult people?
They all lived in Columbus, Ohio, that's why.
That was lucky.
Anyway,
like I hear what you're saying.
These
are all fair criticisms.
They live in Columbus, Ohio, and they bow all the time. Like what?
Sure, yeah. These are all valid criticisms. It's just at the same time, Marvel movies have been getting away with this for years. They've been doing it. Like just blockbuster movies don't do this very often. It's why we notice it so much when they change the script. So it's like this was never anything that I expected from Ready Player One. So like everything you're saying is valid. It's just I knew that this was what it was going to be going in.
Yeah. You don't think this is like a little bit more retrograde than what we've been seeing?
No, not compared to like Ant-Man and the Wasp or something, where it's like
that movie that hasn't come out yet.
Or sorry, what was the fucking one? Oh, it was just called Ant-Man.
Yeah.
It all runs together in my fat, stupid brain. I don't know. It's no worse than Ant-Man, where
it's worse.
Well, what's the thing? Like, I wasn't expecting it to elevate anything. It would be nice, like you said, but like I wasn't expecting that. I was expecting spectacle, and I feel like it didn't deliver on that. I was bored. Like, I want to be entertained, and I just wasn't. So that's why I think this movie just is a big turd.
Michael's so upset he almost swore.
Yes. It was a close one.
It was a big dang turd.
Gosh dang it.
Silly picture we watched. Come on, Michael.
Fuck.
Sure. I don't know. I guess that's always giving me like a point of contention is whether the movie needs to elevate. I guess my issue is that even if it doesn't elevate anything or if it doesn't deconstruct anything, it does too much reinforcing of issues within gaming culture in a gaming culture context where it's like, how did you do this after Gamergate? You know what I mean?
Sure. Well, like at the end of the day, for me, like if this movie had come out like 15 years ago, I still don't think I would have loved it, but I would have liked it more. Like I feel like when we were in high school, we were on the like sort of the last gasp of like geek culture not being mainstream, where it's like I remember like a lot of things would have been way cooler to me where I'm like, oh, there's the Battlestar Galactica, I have one of those at home, I'm a nerd too. Or like you make friends with people when you're like, oh, they like my Army of Darkness t-shirt, they're probably cool, I'm gonna talk to them. And then I just remember like I'd come home like for like coming home over college or something and then running into people and they'd be like, whoa, sweet Green Lantern shirt, like where'd you get that? And like more and more like geek culture was just expanding and it was like there's nothing wrong with that. But once you get to a point like now you have movies that aren't presenting new geek culture. They're just reminding you of geek culture and then trying to pass that off as entertainment. And it's like, so I'm okay with like you finding this movie fun or you liking it or being entertained by it. It's just for me personally, geek culture references and stuff don't mean the same thing that they used to mean to me. It's like we get enough of it everywhere now that like just referencing things doesn't ignite some nostalgia or passion in me where I'm like Dan, you pointed out as a joke to me, like Aliens is one of my favorite movies and you were like, did you see the pulse rifle? And I'm like, so the movie's good. And I'm like, yeah, fuck you. Or like, or when spoiler alert, the Iron Giant falls in the lava and does the little T2 thumbs up. That's when you looked over at me. And,
yeah, I saw the hand on your face. Yeah. I was like, no, you get it though, right?
Yeah, and I was like, there we go. So now the movie's good.
Remember Lord of the Rings?
Yeah.
No, okay. So I think I'll put it this way. So there's a point in the movie where the main character is looking back on Halliday's memories, and then there's this point about like going back. You know what I mean? Halliday like has this moment where he wants to go backwards, and then even like his favorite song is "Video Killed the Radio Star." Probably the only reference that almost got me to be like, "Oh yeah, that's good," is when they mentioned that song because it's a really good song. And there's a line in that song about like we can't rewind, we've gone too far. So there's this sense in the movie where it's saying like it's almost like the movie's saying like you can't go back, you have to go forward. Like it's almost like that's an implicit message of the movie. Yet the movie, or it's like the movie wants that to be a message. Yet the movie is all about going back in every way. Like it's all about these regressive ideas about how a movie should be structured, about what nerd culture is valid. But who are the gatekeepers of nerd culture, of who this is for. And yeah, so that's why it just there's such a disconnect for me between what the movie seems like it should be and what the movie is. Mm-hmm. Like this movie, there's so many ideas that this movie could explore better or things that could be better. And yet it actually goes back in every way. It's regressive. It just reinforces all of the things that we've realized in the last few years are like, yeah, that was kind of like weird about nerd culture, like how this always happens and how we look at women this way and about how these are always the main characters and how this is always except it's that in the worst possible way because it's never been about being good at nerd culture. Nerd culture has been about other things. The thing that made all of the cool properties that are in this movie good is that they weren't about themselves. Like they weren't just like commentaries on like nerd shit. They're like they're about the world. Like even the Iron Giant, it's like it's about there's shit about it's also set in the Cold War and it's talking about that. It's like it's about the real world. Whereas this isn't. So it's almost like nerd culture has started to do this thing where it's like, no, we don't wanna actually engage with the world. We just wanna remember shit that we were into when we were kids. And it's so crazy that Simon Pegg is in this movie because Simon Pegg did that interview where he was talking about how blockbusters used to be substantial, and now they're not, and now they're just like Iron Man fighting Thor, fighting Spider-Man, and then Godzilla shows. Like that's what they. And now this movie is literally that.
Yeah.
And it's like can't this movie be about something? Can't blockbusters and pop culture just be about something instead of being like this nothing, this regressive?
Sure. No, it's kind of like an inevitable point that we've gotten to.
Yeah.
Where you've just seen like blockbusters for the past like decade have just been we're pulling from like comic books and young adult novels, and then it becomes now we're reviving anything with brand recognition, just any old thing, and now we're just telling a flat, generic story wrapped in the skins of better movies. Sorry, Dan.
It is. It's a flat, generic story wrapped in the skin of better movies, and that's what's so like the fraud of this movie is the idea that there's anything to it. Like even like the character of Halliday. One reason why he actually annoys me quite a bit is when I think about it, like he's not really a genius. Like the Oasis isn't that interesting. The Oasis is just.
He just made VR World of Warcraft.
It's VR. The tech is amazing if it were to exist, but what's actually in it, it seems like what would happen if you created this VR world and then just made it open source and let everyone like, all right, guys, mod the hell out of it.
Yeah.
But instead they're like, no, he came up with all this. But it's like he didn't. He just pulling the Akira bike and the Iron Giant.
Okay, so
Gundam.
I have to stop you there because they actually did kind of do this. It's called VR chat, and it is like the most awful, fucking cringeworthy thing ever. That's where the whole Ugandan Knuckles meme came in, and you could like mod the whole world. You can do whatever the fuck you want, and you know what fucking nerds do? They just make like awful racist memes, really weird, awkward stuff, and this giant cesspool of things that are just increasingly worse by the second.
Interesting. It's nerds for you.
So maybe this was a very good depiction of the future that could have been.
Got it.
So Dan, I
hate this movie.
Okay. So we both liked Pacific Rim Uprising.
Yeah.
That was an entertaining.
Yeah.
But then we also spent a lot of that podcast kind of critiquing it.
Mm.
You said you enjoyed this movie, and I know we've been shitting on it a lot, but what didn't you like about this movie? I mean, you're acting like it's really
you guys are literally saying a lot of things that are very, very true about this movie. It's just they don't bother me as much as they obviously bother me.
Yeah, I get it.
Like,
I see what...
That's honestly been the impression that I've had the whole time is like, I think that you there's nothing that like you miss. Like you have a good taste in movies. That's why I became friends with you.
Like I have really low like standards for a lot of movies. Mm-hmm. Like I love just fucking watching movies, and if it like ticks a few boxes, I'm easy to please. Mm-hmm. And this was just like, this isn't a movie I'm gonna remember in like 3 years or so, outside of like someone bringing it up and be like, hey, remember that, kind of like what the movie does about everything. Mm-hmm. But it was just an entertaining experience with friends, and honestly sometimes it's all I want when I just go see a movie.
That's fair.
I guess what bothers me is I am going to remember this movie. I feel like I'm going to remember it so much because it encapsulates so much of what I'm angry about movies and about like nerd culture, and that's why it sticks in my craw so much. It's like this like it's sort of patting nerds on the back for everything they shouldn't be patted on the back for.
I mean, I see some of your points of that. A lot of them seem kind of like outlier issues that like cause Gamergate. One thing that like really annoys like the ever-living piss about me about nerd culture is the toxicity and elitism that is just inherent in fucking everything. Online video games, shooters, message boards, fucking everything. That is far and none the worst part of it, because that's what gives rise to constant racial slurs, hatred, sexism, bigotry, all of that.
Did you notice that like there's actually no toxic behavior in the Oasis?
That is one thing I was actually kind of surprised about, because I think of all movies, Speed Racer had more like toxic elitism behavior. When Speed's like racing around the track at the end, and like he like knocks another racer off the road, probably to their death. He's like, "Get that weak ass shit off my track." And like I was kind of surprised. Like Ready Player One never really like. Yeah, there's a whole conversation early on where they're like talking about their Halliday knowledge and stuff. Like, oh well, I know this much, kind of like showing off. But it was never like, oh, you're some weak-ass scrub that doesn't know that shit. Mm-hmm. And I will say, like, at least from my perspective, I'm glad that they didn't segue into that or celebrate that or build it up in the characters anyway, because that is, like, by far, like, the most disgusting part of nerd culture to me.
But they're also not depicting it in any way. Yeah.
So should they depict it then?
I think there needs to be something. Like the Oasis just feels like, well, everyone's just... I don't know. I guess it depicts...
You wanted Ugandan Knuckles.
I guess. I guess one place in the movie doesn't really know what it's doing is like, okay, it's saying that like, well, nerds, people who play these video games, the people who consume this media are not toxic or problematic at all. It's just corporations that are trying to co-opt them and make profit from them. Which, don't get me wrong, I have no problem with like a critique of like capitalism or like corporations or of people co-opting things and just making them into soulless vehicles for money. That's what this movie is. So I love critiques of that.
Sure, but that's also like the villain we see in every like big successful movie. So it's like it would be nice to see like.
To be fair, though, like there's been this really long ongoing debate in like gaming and stuff with like the whole monetization of like really big popular games now, and that's like really come to a head the last like 8-10 months or so, especially with like the new Star Wars Battlefront game that came out, because it's like an online shooting game, but like to get better weapons and stuff, you either have to grind for hours on end, or you can just pay them money to have a random chance of winning one from a loot box. And that's something that's really shitty and a lot of people are upset about because it's just monetizing something. Basically, you can now pay to win. And that felt like a really big reflection of the villain there. Yeah, he was underwritten and shitty, but for gamers and people that play those things and understand it, it's like that actually kind of hits the nail on the head with things that are really frustrating in the scene.
Yeah, something like that goes over my head because I don't play video games.
True, same.
So I'm
or I play some video games, but
I can only experience the movie as a movie.
Yeah.
Didn't read the book, not really referencing the book in this podcast because the movie has to function on its own.
Same.
But yeah, I understand like there are aspects of this movie, like I'm not a gamer, so a lot of gaming references and stuff, those weren't for me. So it's possible that even I might have missed something. The brilliance that is me.
No.
Thanks. He means no, there's no way I would have missed anything. Thanks, Yezin.
So there's a moment before like the big battle sequence starts where like Twisted Sister's "We're Not Gonna Take It" starts playing, and that's the moment
Just general rock and roll, guys.
And that's the moment where I think I shifted from being like really pissed about the identity politics of the movie to the point where I was just really pissed about like the movie's inability to have any like message at all or understanding of like the fact that like the villains are like a big corporation, yet the corporation like functions like without. It just like so externalized from like the actual gamers, and the gamers aren't depicted as a problem at all, and the corporation is all that's bad, and they're like totally separate, yet the corporation also like.
For me, it makes sense in the context in that like they're not. You wouldn't call these people in the future in this world gamers because it's grown to a point where everyone's fucking in it.
Right,
like,
but
literally everyone.
Again,
That's
true.
There's those hotels, yeah.
But again, and that's one problem that I think the movie doesn't.
You mean the Overlook Hotel, right?
Like I agree that it's not just gamers based on the plot, but I don't think like symbolically it really does seem like it's about gamers. Like it doesn't seem like everybody.
That's what it's pandering to, obviously.
Yeah, but everybody doesn't feel like it's symbolic for everybody. It feels like it's really just symbolic. Like it should be symbolic for everybody, but it's not. Like there's sort of a sense that like no, this is about nerd culture, like a certain subculture that the author Ernest Cline was into as a kid, and now like I guess in this expands to like just nerd culture in general versus the corporate sellouts who want to co-opt it and monetize it, who technically make a lot of this shit in the first place anyway. Yeah. I hate this movie, guys.
You do?
I hate it so much.
Oh, so they played Twisted Sister, We're Not Gonna Take It because they weren't gonna take it anymore.
Yeah.
Oh shit.
Whoa.
I just got that. Deep. This movie is good. Never mind. This is good.
Don't even say that as a joke because they can't see you smiling. It's no, I'm really upset about it.
Yeah, I didn't like it.
Yeah.
It's fucking sweet.
WolfPunch.